Nestled between a row of bodegas, a laundromat, and a Dominican restaurant that stayed open past midnight, there was a modest brick garage with a hand-painted sign that read Cruz Auto Repairs. It had been there for years, barely noticeable among the chaos of Queens. In a city obsessed with reinvention, this place had remained stubbornly the same, and so had Elijah Cruz. Elijah was a man of few words. He was in his mid-30s, tall, slightly stooped from years under hoods and dashboards, with a shaved head and deeply set eyes that always looked focused, even when he was just thinking. He worked alone. Not because he had to, but because he preferred it. Music never played in the shop. The only soundtrack was the clinking of metal, the hiss of a hydraulic lift, and the occasional subway rattle in the distance. People in the neighborhood knew him as reliable, affordable, and quietly brilliant. They respected that he didn't upsell or talk nonsense, but they didn't know what he was really building. Above the garage, Elijah lived in a one-room loft that looked more like a lab than a home. On one side, his bed and a small hot plate. On the other, a cluttered workbench covered in notebooks, circuit boards, and welded components. For the past 3 years, Elijah had been obsessively developing a new type of electric propulsion system, something lightweight, silent, and radically affordable. He wasn't doing it for money or fame. He was doing it because the automotive world had forgotten people like him. Late one Friday night, as he adjusted the torque settings on a prototype controller, his customer Jason barged in, holding a bag of takeout and a phone. "Yo, Eli, you see this? Some big car show next week in Manhattan. They got flying Lambos and crypto-sponsored Bentleys. You should roll up with your Frankenstein car." Elijah wiped his hands on a rag, looked at Jason's phone, then turned away without answering. Jason laughed. The Javits Center in Manhattan looked like a monument to excess that Saturday morning. Outside, black SUVs and media vans clogged the streets. Inside, the ceiling lights bounced off the bodies of million-dollar vehicles lined up like art pieces in a gallery. Digital walls played looped ads with muscular narrators and firecracker visuals. The words luxury, performance, and innovation were everywhere. Elijah arrived in a U-Haul van. Alone, he wore a plain gray jacket and jeans. No press team, no entourage. His booth was tucked in the back corner of the independent inventors section, a strip barely wider than a hallway, wedged between a virtual reality display and a 3D printed bicycle startup. He unloaded the Whisper One, a matte gray, angular car that looked more like a prototype from a sci-fi movie than a street-ready vehicle. He laid out a single sheet of specs on the table. No branding, no lights, just data. Within an hour, people began to notice him, but not because they were impressed. 2 men in designer suits stopped and laughed out loud. "Looks like something made from spare IKEA parts," one said. Another woman wearing a media badge shook her head. "Is it even drivable?" Elijah stood silently beside the car. His calm made him look defiant, even though he wasn't trying to be. By noon, a buzz spread. Not about his invention, but about the spectacle of it. The joke, people took photos. Influencers posed near the Whisper One, mocking it on Instagram. And Elijah, he watched it all unflinching. At 3 o'clock, the host announced a brief demo session for indie developers. Most people stayed seated. Then Elijah stepped forward. Without saying a word, he walked to the driver's seat, pressed a button, and brought the Whisper One to life. No sound, no. When the Whisper One came to a halt, people didn't clap at first. They didn't know how to react. They had just watched something that looked like a homemade car move smoother and quieter than anything in the room. Elijah stepped out, walked around the vehicle, and finally spoke. 300 horsepower, fully electric, under $7,000, all parts repurposed from local supply chains. Designed for longevity, not replacement. The room began to murmur. A few engineers moved closer. A group of college students pulled out their phones, recording everything. Someone in the back shouted, "But how safe is it?" Elijah nodded toward a folder he laid on the table. It held lab certifications, structural test results, and testimonials from independent mechanics and engineers across the boroughs. A man stepped forward. Tall, slick, expensive watch, silk scarf over a cashmere coat. Blair Hammond, angel investor. He looked over the folder and laughed. "This is cute," he said, "but let me be clear. A prototype doesn't make you a pioneer. Safety takes years, regulation even longer. What you have here is a fantasy." Elijah met his eyes. "I didn't build a..." Within 48 hours, the demo video of the Whisper One hit over 15 million views. Tech blogs, engineering forums, and independent news outlets picked up the story. "The Silent Revolution from Queens," read one headline. Another called Elijah the EV Whisperer. But not everyone was thrilled. Blair Hammond, feeling threatened, launched a counter-campaign. Anonymous tips were sent to regulatory agencies. Claims were made that Elijah's design hadn't passed federal safety checks. A viral Twitter thread accused the Whisper One of being a dangerous backyard experiment. Elijah didn't respond publicly. He didn't tweet. He didn't call a press conference. He went back to work. What he did do quietly was send full blueprints and test data to Columbia University's Urban Transport Lab. Within a week, they published a public endorsement. A respected professor even called it one of the most promising low-cost mobility systems we've seen in a decade. Still, the legal pressure mounted. Elijah received notice of a pending investigation by the Department of Motor Vehicles. Licensing questions, insurance roadblocks, barriers the industry used to choke innovation. Then, help arrived from an unexpected place. A nonprofit focused on sustainable mobility contacted Elijah. They offered resources, legal counsel, safety consulting, and most importantly, funding. Their mission was to revolutionize transportation access in underserved communities. Whisper One was their dream come true. Elijah accepted with one condition. He wanted to start an apprenticeship program for at-risk youth in Queens, teach them everything he knew, build not just cars but careers. By spring, a new sign went up beside the garage. Cruz Future Mobility Lab. Blair Hammond attempted one last stunt, offering Elijah $5 million for full rights to the technology. Elijah declined. "It's not for sale," he said, "not like that." On a rainy Thursday, Elijah was invited to speak at the New York Tech Mobility Forum. He stood in front of an audience of CEOs, engineers, and press. "I didn't grow up thinking I'd change the auto world. I grew up thinking I'd survive it. But somewhere along the way, I realized if we only build for the rich, we're not building any." 6 months later, the first official fleet of Whisper One vehicles hit the streets of New York. Owned not by moguls or collectors, but by delivery drivers, teachers, and ride-hailers who could now afford a reliable electric car. In Queens, the garage became a campus. Teens learned soldering, diagnostics, and coding. Some had never touched a wrench before. Others were already innovating beyond what Elijah imagined. One morning, a journalist visited the shop and watched Elijah help a 17-year-old rewire a dashboard system. She asked, "How does it feel to go from a joke at a car show to someone who might reshape the industry?" Elijah didn't look up. He just handed the teen another connector and said softly, "Enjoyed the story? Then hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep bringing powerful, real-life inspired stories like this one." Drop a comment, what would you have done in his shoes? And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.